What's up, my ninjas? I'm Strident, and I'm back with another review. This time we're taking a look at the MOTU CLASSICS Adora and She-ra figures. I've had these two for quite some time. You've probably seen them in the back of a bunch of my reviews. It's strange because She-ra was never a character that I actually wanted initially until I saw this version of the character. And then all kinds of ideas flooded my head with kind of where she would fit in the Masters of the Universe lore, you know, since she's the twin sister of He-Man, and she was at one point, as Adora, working under Hordak. It would be kind of cool to have her as part of my, old school Hordak's evil horde, and then play out those events that, she decides to join the side of good and join the Great Rebellion. So it's kind of cool that they actually did this, because I do remember watching the old school He-Man and, fondly my sister and I, figuring out where She-ra fit into the He-Man stuff. Because my sister, she had a ton of She-ra stuff. So anyway, I'm going to get into a little bit more of that, but I'm going to get into why I like this figure and what Mattel did right and what they did wrong with the figure. So, kick back, relax, and listen to me yap for a while. So the sculpt and the paint. The sculpt is pretty consistent. There's very minor differences between Adora and She-ra. But I mean, if you've seen these characters in the cartoon, the Filmation series, this is exactly what you get. Even in the comics, this is pretty much what you get. I kind of wish that they updated her a little bit like they did during the 2000X line. 2002 He-Man, the old school Mike Young Productions. The Four Horsemen did a version that was based on the Teela body. But, seeing her side by side with He-Man still is dope. Now, because I'm such a big fan of the 2002 series, my He-Man is a mix, between the two, but he's more on that side of the scale. I loved how He-Man was flipping around, and when he would land, it'd be a huge doom, because he's a huge guy who's nimble as, as heck, and then ridiculously strong too. And they actually fought, so I dig that. I dig the new Power Sword. I don't have any issues with the old one, but I dig the new one. It just adds to the feel of Masters of the Universe. But She-ra is very delicate looking, but very powerful at the same time. She's got like a very, what's the word? Kind of a Valkyrian design. She reminds me of a Valkyrie, and I'm pretty sure that was the inspiration behind her design. She is very much a Valkyrie, and she looks good. And they gave her just the perfect thickness, so she doesn't feel too muscular and, too manly. She looks cool enough that, she still has the aesthetics that a lot of girls are, appeal to a lot of girls, and then also has those same aesthetics that appeal to, guys. And the Horsemen were really slick about finding ways to mix in elements from the original toy. Because I remember the original toy because my sister was so pissed because it didn't look like the one on the show. So I remember that vividly, because I had, what did I have? I had the Battle Armor He-Man, the one with you flick the chest and it had the two, the clean and the one strike and then the two strikes and the three strikes. I had that. And I always wanted the He-Man that looked like the one in the show. But at the time that I got into He-Man, it was too late. So back to this, She-ra though. She looks good. Adora looks really cool. There are little things that you're going to have to be aware of if you plan on trying to pose her in dynamic poses. I kind of have something in store for mine, and you can kind of see it on this picture. The same issue doesn't really exist with Adora because of the shape of her tunic. It allows for her legs to do more, so they did a good job sculpting that. Her holster and gun fit perfectly where they're supposed to fit. The gun itself is really retro looking, and it looks cool. I just dig the look, man. There's just something so semi-nostalgic about the classics in general. And, these two are indicative of that feeling. I look at, Adora, and I'm like, this kind of feels like the Adora, exactly the Adora from the cartoon. And then there's, you know, the musculature, and then the kind of thickness that she has reminds me of, you know, comics and whatnot, where they give her a little bit more of a bustier, you know, almost Frank Frazetta female body type. And I dig that. I dig it a lot. It's kind of one of the things that always drew me to sword and sorcery stories, you know, and like I love the way women in those books were drawn, you know. And when I was a kid, and I was like, you know, when you're in your early puberty, you're figuring this stuff out. And you see these kind of women, and, you know, all around you on TV and everywhere else, you see the scrawny supermodel type. I knew from this artwork that I was more, you know, attracted, and I liked this type of a woman. So when you look at my art, my women kind of lean more in this direction. They're a little bit thicker, got a little bit more muscle on them sometimes. I'm not drawing wavy, you know, thin, skinny chicks all the time. So I like that. She looks very capable, very heroic, very strong. The paint apps on this are amazing. They're extremely clean. Hasbro needs to pay attention. It just amazes me at times. Overall, though, they hit every mark that they were trying to hit. I mean, you can clearly tell that they are taking cues directly from both the animated series and the original toy. The sword with the jewel placement and everything, even the color of the sword, that's taken straight out of the Filmation series. As you'll see with the alternate head and the weapons, they took some details right out of off of the original figure, which I think had a terrible design. I mean, this was in there, but with all the crap on her, it was a fucking terrible design. And I'll go through that a little bit more with accessories, because, you know, a lot of those elements kind of start showing when you look at the accessories. Now, as you can see on the left-hand side, her hair near her face is kind of chunky. You know what I mean? Like the paint is chunky and it kind of looks, you know, kind of messed up. But sculpt-wise, it's the same head, same lips, same eyes. They just slightly colored her makeup on her face a little bit different. Her skin tone is just a little bit different. It's a little more radiant as She-ra. And as you know, Akiba Red loves it. It's kind of cool, you know, these kind of details when you have two figures, you know, almost like your Superman and your Clark Kent figure. These are cool things. The cape itself is one piece of plastic. If you remove the head, which is easy to do because it's on a ball joint, you can just pop the head off and then pull the cape off and then just have her fight, you know, with just the tunic and whatnot. So, you know, overall it's real simple, really straightforward. It's not a bad design at all, you know what I mean? My biggest gripe is with the skirt, and I'll get to that later. But, you know, like I said, she's pretty damn posable. She's pretty sturdy, you know, considering the price that these guys go for. I was thinking that she was going to be kind of fragile, but she's not fragile at all. She's actually a very sturdy figure, so it'll be easy for you to put her in your Masters of the Universe collection, because she's 100% just as tough as He-Man and the rest of the Masters, you know? And her design is not too, you know, ridiculous, because I found that a lot of the MOTU CLASSICS versions of the She-ra characters are pretty fucking lame. It's like the color schemes just look ridiculous, and, you know, the designs overall just look ridiculous. So, I'm not a fan, you know. Bo, horrible color scheme, but a kind of a cool looking figure. But she doesn't suffer from that. So, you know, kudos to them for that, as usual. Alright, I'm going to go real quick over the articulation on these guys, or ladies. It's really not that special. I'll use Adora because it's almost, it is identical for the most part. So we'll start at the head. Move this sword out the way. So the head can look down that much, looks up that much. You can turn it side to side a little bit. The hair in the back does get in the way. Her arms come up that much. They go up this much. This tunic piece is a soft plastic. Bend at the elbow. There's a bicep swivel. There's a twist at the wrist. Twist at the wrist. There's a twist at the waist, but it's underneath the tunic. So when you turn the legs, you can see it all do what it does. The legs go up this far. You kind of have to force it because of the tunic. But that's not too bad. Single bend at the knee. There is an anatomically correct thigh swivel in there, which I love. Swivel at the boot, which is not my favorite thing, but you know, it's here. Point, and go up that much, and point that much. And there's a cool like ankle rocker, like the old school Marvel Legends style ankle rocker, where you can see the joint. See all that? And that's really it for her. I mean, there's not anything special. She stands up well, but the ankles kind of suck because they don't put ratchets in them, which they should. They should always. I mean, SH Figure Arts uses ball joints, and I think that's probably the best way to do it. But they constantly kind of lean forward. You know what I'm saying? And that's a problem. It was a problem on DCUCs as well. With She-ra, I had cut, and I took pictures earlier. I cut this piece here. I always do that on tunics that are longer, and I was going to cut off all of this and replace it with cloth. And I think now, because it ripped up top here, I'll probably do that for sure. And she has a plastic cape that if you pull off the head, you can just pop off the cape just like Catra. Hate plastic capes. I'm going to be redoing that as well. So that is the articulation for those two. So here's where I get into the part that I have issues with, and that's the lower portion of the tunic, the skirt portion. If you don't cut it, she won't have any freedom or for range of motion for her legs. And I had to do so. And in cutting it, you can see at the belt, when you pose her a little bit, it starts to rip along the belt line in the front. Now what I might do is just remove the front half and put cloth, like a longer piece of white cloth, and just leave the back half since it's still connected and it still looks pretty good. If the back half starts to rip, then I'll replace the back half. But that's just something to be aware of. The loincloth, you know, tunic kind of gets in the way of leg articulation, and that is a point down for me. Her accessories are pretty simple when it comes to Adora. Adora's only accessories, her pistol and her sword, and the belt with the holster that, you know, you put the pistol in. Now I got her from Big Fun used, so if she does come with anything else, you know what I mean, I'm missing those parts. The sculpt on these two are pretty cool. I almost wish that, well, I'll get to that in a second. The pistol is beautiful. It's very old school. So is the holster that it goes to. Very nice, minimalist details on it, and it just looks good. It's well painted, really clean paint, no slop. The pistol just looks like something that you've seen in like an old sci-fi film from like the 70s, or maybe even the like a 70s sci-fi film that is trying to channel the 40s or the 30s, you know, like Flash Gordon and such. And there are a lot of details and design elements from the Masters of the Universe line that kind of harken back to that time. I mean, just look at Captain Marlena. She is definitely one of those throwback designs. But the gun works well. She can hold it in both hands. She holds it better in this hand. You can see the way they sculpted the trigger. They actually cut away a piece of the trigger guard, so you can just slip her hand up in there and it looks proper. It almost looks like she actually is holding onto the trigger. I wish more companies, when making characters that use guns, would make the guns like that, instead of making the gun complete with the trigger guard and not even trying to engineer how it works with, you know, your character's hand. The sword is pretty cool, and I'm going to go into the sword in a second. But as for She-ra, She-ra comes with a second head, a shield, a comb / axe, and then her sword. So head, shield, axe, and the sword. And I guess you could count the cape if you want to be, you know, nitpicky. and try to, you know, really count everything, but that seems like it's something that she was already packaged with, so, you know, wearing. So I don't even consider that a separate piece. It is removable though. And, you know, all the paint and all the, you know, what is painted on those things looks really good. It's well done. Um, the sculpt is really clean. The seam lines are kind of out of the way, so you're not like struggling, you know, because sometimes with these figures, you're paying this ridiculous premium and you're still seeing seam lines all over the place. You're still seeing flash. Like, why would you want flash on something that costs, you know, the $40, you know, or whatever, 35 bucks. Anyway, her sword's beautiful, really well done. I wish though, and this is what I was going to say earlier, I wish that the sword was just one color. Because one problem I have with the Masters of the Universe collection is that there's too many different versions of the power sword. I mean, it got so bad that they had to retcon and come up, well, I shouldn't say retcon, but they had to design a story or recreate the origin story for the swords, or the purpose for the two swords, because He-Man now has a different sword and She-Ra has the more classic sword. So they had to find a way to make like the big sword is King Grayskull's sword, and then the classic swords are still it doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, if there is supposed to be one plot, it doesn't make sense. I wish that she just had one sword and it was, you know, both swords are the same color. The buckler or shield has the stone in it, just like the old days, and the design looks really cool. It reminds me of Amazonian stuff, Amazonian style, Amazonian, what's the word I'm looking for? Aesthetics. The axe comb, I think this is clever, because the original ones came with combs because they had rooted hair. And, you know, because back in those days, all girls' toys had rooted hair and came with combs and came with brushes and makeup and blah, 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 whatever, you know, or water to spray on to simulate the makeup shit. And I don't know, but they were smart about it here. The shield, I meant to say earlier, it just clips onto her arm right around the wrist. And it holds on there really well. And it's really sturdy feeling, you know, so you don't have to worry about feeling like you'll break it if you make her do something. Now, this is the point of contention for me. This stupid head needs to go. I know that there are people out there who, for nostalgia's sake, supposedly there's all these boys out there that had She-Ra. I don't remember it like that, because I remember those days very clearly, and I remember we steered away from these kind of toys because they were marketed for girls. 100%, there was no piece of it that, you know, would appeal to a little boy back in those days. You know what I mean? Like, the way things were. Not to say that there weren't boys that played with them, but, you know, I don't remember this being a big thing. None of my friends that played with He-Man were like, oh, I gotta get that new She-Ra. So, you know, part of the reason was that she looked like this. When my sister did get a whole bunch of She-Ra dolls, and we started like customizing them and taking pieces away and adding pieces from other characters, yeah, they became more appealing. So for me, I'm sticking with the standard She-Ra head. That second head is going in my box of stuff, and I probably will never take it out again, because I think it's absolutely fucking horrible. I mean, I don't even understand why she would flip her thing upside down to have a mask on in the first place. I mean, I guess it's something harkening back to the old school, you know, mini comics where they did all kinds of weird things that somehow didn't translate into the cartoon and didn't exactly translate into the toys, or they did kind of. I mean, I don't know. They have a strange history with doing these kind of things. But for me, it is an absolute no. No. Mm-mm. Now, I've always wondered why people don't do more comparisons. Ever since I first saw these figures, I was always wondering why they didn't do a MOTU version of Wonder Woman, because this body would be perfect for Wonder Woman, because this is the thickness that I'm talking about that she should have. The height's already there, make her thicker, you know? I mentioned this when I was reviewing, I think it was Catra. I think it was. Or she was in a review or something, and I pointed out her body type, and I was like, that would be perfect for Wonder Woman. this is my favorite Wonder Woman, and you already see that the stature is closer to the She-Ra style. And I'm like, why can't that just be, you know, a version of Wonder Woman that we get? And this is an old DC Direct figure, so, you know, it's the Ed McGuinness style. He's already kind of hitting the mark with what I think Wonder Woman should always be like, and it would be nice if Mattel would give us a, you know, a Wonder Woman that feels like this. But you can see that she is pretty tall, she's pretty thick, but she's still very feminine and still fits in well with, you know, some of your other lines. So yeah, don't be afraid to mix these guys up with other things that you got going on. So the bottom line, if you're a fan of She-Ra, this figure has beautiful sculpt, beautiful paint, pretty good accessories minus that stupid head, which might work for you. You know, the head, actually, you can pull that mask piece out and there's like a big square chunk on her head that's missing. And when you take it out, I guess theoretically you could flip it around and then put it back in, but it won't look like this. You know what I mean? So I stick with this head. I think this looks better. So yeah, you know, the accessories are good. The articulation is pretty good. The paint job is good. It's all good. She looks cool with your He-Man figures. She looks cool, obviously, with the Princess of Power figures. I think because of the style of the figure, this works better for us now. Whereas back in the day, it was kind of questionable in some ways because, you know, everything was like, these are boys' toys, these are girls' toys. Not to say that, you know, girls and boys didn't swap, but, you know, things were kind of very specific. You know, many boys didn't have Rainbow Bright anything. You know what I'm saying? Your sister had Rainbow Bright everything. So, you know, when you see this, at first I was kind of like, really? That many dudes wanted She-Ra in their collection? But you got to remember that in the cartoon, She-Ra showed up. You know, they crossed over. And in the comics, there were some comics that actually did mention the fact that these two, you know, they were twins, and, you know, the twins got separated, you know, while they were young, and, you know, two power swords and the blah, 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 and the blah, blah, blah. So, you know, if you're into all that, then here you go. For me, we always had our own little explanation for all this stuff. I'm not going to bore you with it here. But, you know, if you make up your own stuff, this works well too, and they look cool together. I think that's the most important thing. So, this has been my review of the MOTU She-Ra and Adora figures. I think they're awesome. You should pick them up. They're not very expensive, strangely enough. They don't go for more than about 30 bucks a piece. Sometimes you'll see crazy auctions and stuff for them, but overall, that's about the price. I think you should pick them up. They're awesome. And, you know, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, thanks for watching, and peace outside.